CNN projects that Republicans will win control of the U.S. House of Representatives, reclaiming a majority for the first time in 4 years. This is a major blow to Democrats as Republicans gain new power to potentially limit President Biden's agenda and to make crucial decisions about House investigations. Let's go to Manu Raju up on Capitol Hill. This is a major development right now. The Republicans take the majority in the House, Manu.
Yeah, and with that, the power of the committees and the power to set the agenda, which is why this is hugely significant. Even though it is not as big of a majority as Kevin McCarthy, the Republican leader, had wanted. They had hoped that they would be in the 230-seat range, maybe even 240-seat range. We don't know the final numbers here, but we do know that they have at least 218 seats. That is the majority to take back the House. They may have up to 220. We'll see ultimately how many they have, but significant, because once you have the majority in the U.S. House, you have the chairmanships and each of the key committees. That means you have subpoena power. You can set schedules for hearings. You can call cabinet secretaries to come testify. You can do what your party wants to do. On the floor of the House, the Speaker of the House Majority Leader get to set the exact schedule, what they're going to bring to the floor, what they refuse to bring to the floor, and decide the priorities, which is why winning back one chamber of Congress will have significant ramifications for the next 2 years of the Biden administration. Remember, Wolf, the Democrats had control of the House and the Senate in the first 2 years under Joe Biden. They had the narrowest of majorities, 50-50 in the Senate. They had a handful of seats in the Democratic-led House. They were still able to do a significant amount of legislation by passing bills, for some significant bills, along straight party lines, because they could do that under the budget process that allowed them to pass something like a nearly $2 trillion COVID relief bill. Also, that sweeping Inflation Reduction Act dealing with healthcare, climate change, taxes, and other issues. They will no longer be able to do that because in order to move through the budget process, you need to have support within, essentially, among your party, and Republicans and Democrats would not agree to move such sweeping legislation like that. So what does this mean for the next 2 years, Wolf? It means that any legislation that will pass almost certainly will be incremental. It will have to require a significant amount of consensus on both sides of the aisle. It would still need to surpass a 60-vote threshold in the Senate. Even as the Democrats are going to regain control of the Senate, they may have 51 seats, but they will still need 60 to pass anything. So what can actually get done in the next 2 years is an open question, but they will have major things to deal with next year, including raising the national debt ceiling to avoid a debt default next year, funding the government, always a tricky issue, something that could lead to a shutdown if there is not an agreement between the two sides. But at the moment, the big pressure point for the administration will be those investigations into the Biden family, the border, the origins of the coronavirus, among a whole wide range of other issues, as a new dynamic here is now in Washington, Wolf.
Manu, I want you to stand by. Jeremy Diamond is over at the White House for us, watching all of this unfold as well. Major development right now. CNN projecting that the Republicans will win the majority in the House of Representatives. Jeremy, I assume officials over where you are at the White House were bracing for this.
No doubt about it, Wolf. This is a major inflection point in Joe Biden's presidency. For his first 2 years in office, he has enjoyed control from a Democratic perspective, of both the House and the Senate. And for the first time in his presidency, Joe Biden is now staring down the barrel of divided government, of power sharing with Republicans in a way that he has not yet had to experience as president of the United States. And this is going to be a real test of one of the major things that he ran on during his 2020 campaign, which is this idea that he can perhaps be a bridge between the two parties. Right now, that appears to be the last thing that's going to happen. We know that Republicans are sharpening their investigative and oversight powers, that they are preparing to wield that subpoena power against the Biden administration on a number of fronts. Investigations into everything from the withdrawal of Afghanistan to the Department of Homeland Security's handling of border security. Impeachment threats have been made both at the Secretary of Homeland Security as well as at the president himself. But to be clear, this is a White House that has been preparing for all of that for months now. And they are also looking at the fact that this is a House Republican majority that is going to be the narrowest majority in the House in decades. And so while they will still have to face the subpoena power of this House Republican majority, as slim as it may be, that does not change There is a certain sentiment here at the White House, I can tell you in speaking with officials, Wolf, that they are giddy at the prospect of Kevin McCarthy having to wrangle this very narrow and oftentimes very rowdy Republican caucus to getting things done. But a number of challenges beyond the investigations that this White House now faces in terms of funding the government, addressing issues like the debt ceiling, for example. These are all things that President Biden was warning about on the midterm campaign trail over the last several months, and now it is a reality that he will have to confront. Lastly, Wolf, I would just add, President Biden, as much as he has experience with a number of Republicans on Capitol Hill, Kevin McCarthy is not one of them. And he is, of course, the most likely person to become the next Speaker of the House. And he's someone who President Biden, while they spoke last week, they really have not had many dealings, Wolf, but you can be sure that they will have to speak much more going forward.
They certainly will. All right, Jeremy Diamond at the White House, thank you very much. Jeff Zeleny, let's talk a little bit about this. The Senate, the Democrats will be the majority in the new Senate, but the Republicans will be the majority in the new House. Talk a little bit about that.
And it is a sea change here in Washington. It's coming a week after the midterm election, so it sounds like it's not quite as dramatic, but it actually will be in January when the Congress reconvenes in the new Congress. And even though the majority is slim, the oversight power will sting just as much to this White House in terms of really inspecting the spending that's been going on the COVID relief bills, really looking into, where some of this infrastructure money is going, and calling in secretaries, for the grilling that they will certainly give. So we're going to see a couple different things play out. Yes, there's going to be drama among House Republicans among themselves, but there's also going to be a sense of purpose about going after the Biden administration. Hunter Biden, the president's son, is already going to be front and center in some of these investigations. So that is one of the things that is going to happen. So even though it's a narrow majority, likely on the one hand of our finger, probably single digits for sure, maybe 5 seats, maybe 8 seats, but that does not mean that these committees won't have the investigative authority. But interestingly also, I think the House and the Senate, what can get done here? There was such a big message that was sent from voters to Washington that people want to get something done. So we heard Senator McConnell say that earlier. He actually hopes that that they can find agreement on some things in the middle of the road here. We'll see about that. But it is a huge sea change in the new Congress next year.
And Nia, I think one of the first things the Republican majority in the House probably will do is eliminate the January 6th Select Committee.
Oh, I think that's exactly right. I mean, it's as good as gone right now. And listen, that's why you saw the Democrats, when they were in control, do as much work as they did. And my goodness, they interviewed hundreds of witnesses and put on really compelling hearings. That is gone, and we'll see the reverse of that, right? We'll see investigations into the Biden administration, investigations into the Afghanistan withdrawal, and it'll be something that the Biden administration will have to deal with. Democrats say in some ways maybe that won't be a terrible thing, because it could show Republicans overreaching, right? Focusing on issues that don't necessarily benefit average Americans as they grapple with inflation and a tough economy. And does that make Biden sort of look like he's above it all and focusing on the sort of bread and butter issues that voters actually care about?
One of the other things they may investigate is the January 6th committee.
Sure. Yeah.
The Republicans have been complaining that they don't have access to all of these transcripts and interviews. I know one of the things the committee is dealing with right now is what do they release before they turn into a pumpkin and they're no longer in control. I want to add one other word, and that is Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. Because of the chaos we've been talking about in the Republican conference, because of the Freedom Caucus members, people like Matt Gaetz, who will blow something up just to blow something up, Donald Trump is going to have more power with the Republican conference, because someone like Kevin McCarthy, as we were talking about earlier before, may need to reach out to him to say, help me get these guys in order.
He will do that.
We're going to see a lot of chaos.
Without a doubt, and it's already coming as a presidential campaign is already building. Usually it starts in the next year. Obviously, the events of last night are showing that it's starting right now. But I also think, though, it is still a moment for if there's a political middle, and the election does not leave much opportunity for that. But there is a demand in the country for both the House and the Senate to do something. And we are seeing that much more on the Senate side. So the synergies between both houses of Congress is going to be fascinating to watch. But the investigation, some things that they'll be looking at, and we heard a lot of talk about, is there going to be an impeachment inquiry for President Biden?
Right.
I would be very surprised in this case because the majority is so narrow. It just does not seem that there's room for that. But there is some substantive work, some very serious committee chairmen that really have some things to look into. So that is the biggest thing for the White House. But as Jeremy was saying earlier, the White House has been bracing for this. They've been hiring lawyers, advising agencies. So this is just how it works. And what is what usually happens in a midterm election. It's happening a week later, but is just as significant.